All right. Hello, viewers. Good day from the city of Lagos, Nigeria. I welcome you to Take the Lead with Dr. Elvis UKPAKA. I promise today is going to be a wonderful one because I have a distinguished Nigerian with me as a guest. He's someone that I respect so much, and I've had the singular privilege of working with him for several years now. What I do today was as a result of the leverage he gave me to the opportunity he gave me to speak in one of his events. And from there, my life have never been the same again. And he has been a mentor and, will I say a father, a friend, whatever you can call him. He has been there for me. If I decide to read out all his profile here, I don't think we'll have time for what we have today. So I'll just say a little bit about him. Professor Patrick Okedinachi Utomi was born on February 6, 1956. He is a Nigerian professor of political economics and a management consultant. He is a fellow of the Institute of Management Consultant of Nigeria and a former presidential candidate. He is the founder of Center for Values in Leadership, popularly known as the CVL, and the Africa Democratic Congress. He is a professor at Lagos Business School and has served in senior positions in government as an advisor to the President of Nigeria, the private sectors, and also as a Chief Operating Officer of Volkswagen Nigeria. Professor Pat Utomi sits at board of several organizations in this country, and he's a distinguished author of several books on management and public policy. Please join me as we welcome Professor Pat Utomi in the house. Prof, you are welcome, sir.
Thank you so very much. I'm glad to be able to join.
Thank you so much. It's really a great honor to have you in this program. Now, let's just go to business. I want us to just take a cursory look at COVID-19. Really, the world has never seen it like this before. Aside the Spanish flu of 1918, 1920, that recorded huge deaths, millions of deaths, I don't think there is any pandemic of this magnitude. As of today, the current global statistics of COVID-19 stands at 9.7 million confirmed cases and well over 493,000 deaths, with the United States leading at 127,000 deaths and 2.5 million cases. Now let's come back to Nigeria. We have over 23,000 confirmed cases and with over 554 deaths as of today. To say the world is in fear is understatement. Apart from the incessant death we see daring us on a daily basis, there is also the fear of what tomorrow holds. The leaders of the world, including our own leaders, are confused. Corporate leaders are being mesmerized, not knowing which way to go. Even families are not left out. My question is there an end to this fear? Is there hope at the end of the tunnel? If there is, how soon, sir? Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I think that part of the challenge of living is that we learn every day to solve problems. Problems will arise. They come from the nature of our humanity, and the quality of the stuff that we are made of comes through in how we respond to the problems that do come our way. It is true that COVID-19 came at us as a surprise, but it's not also completely true that it was not anticipated. I mean, very frequently shared is YouTube um, video of Bill Gates making a speech during the Ebola crisis and warning about the next pandemic. Really, truly, um, the nature of man's interaction with his environment has meant that from time to time, uh, an epidemic or pandemic is sprung on man. In more recent years, we've dealt with, of course, the Ebola crisis, the swine flu, the avian flu, and most of these come from the relationship between man and the animal kingdom. And in that process, beginning significantly with uh, man's early effort to begin to domesticate food production away from the wild where man, used to just go and gather. When man began to domesticate food production in the Fertile Crescent, that part from Egypt through Mesopotamia, that area, today's Iraq and all of that, those efforts brought man into contact with animals more closely and resulted in a series of diseases that came out of that. People forget, we talk about pandemic, people forget that the Americas, as we know them today, Latin America, that's South America, and North America, that European domination of those regions were not, as history sometimes tries to say, a matter of conquest of those people. They really came from pandemics that wiped out the original population of those places. What happened in history was that when Europeans got there, there were people who lived there who had not had any immunities built up because they had not had the experience Europeans had with those diseases. And so when 200 and something people get off a boat in Mexico, for example, where the Aztecs had a huge civilization, there were millions of them, they had great armies and all of that, and 200 and something people from Europe defeat millions of great warriors, it's not reasonable. What basically happened was that when they interacted with the Native Americans, measles and all kinds of diseases that they brought with them, which they as Europeans had developed immunity to, literally wiped out the populations of those places. 99% of those who lived in North America were killed by this. So man's interaction with disease is long. In fact, one of the nicer books, I think, on economic development, written by Princeton, a professor who won the Nobel Prize for Economics in 2015, The Great Escape. And The Great Escape is about health, wealth, and the origins of inequality. So healthcare, the germ theory of disease, coming upon all of those were very, very important in how humanity began to master its environment and to grow wealthy and get. So, yes, this pandemic took us by surprise, but no, it was not unanticipated in a manner of speaking. What separates those who do well from those who don't do well is how you manage uncertainty. Ironically, that is the title of a book that I wrote in 1998, Managing Uncertainty. So uncertainty will come at you, even though the focus of that book was on strategy in emerging economies. But it's about the fact that uncertainty is higher in an emerging economy than, say, in an industrial market economy in North America. So uncertainty is part of life. And the great managers are the ones who respond more appropriately in reducing uncertainty to a measurable risk. All entrepreneurial ventures, true entrepreneurial ventures, for example, start in the realm of uncertainty because nobody had done it before. But as the entrepreneur gathers more information, the risk of doing that becomes measurable, becomes something that there's a distribution probability that you can calculate. And so in the spectrum, it begins to move from uncertainty to manageable risk. And that's what we must be trying to do today, to manage down the risk of this uncertainty that we have met.
Thank you so much, Prof. That is quite expository. There have been quite a number of uh, things people were saying. There's this issue of 5G and all the rest. It was man-made in China and all the rest. Well, let's leave that for now, but let's just come down to reality now. And that brings us back to adapting to the new normal because COVID-19 is here now and we can't run away from it. So it's now our own responsibility now to manage ourselves in it and to overcome. And the new phrase that is around now is new normal, which is a popular cliche in recent times, and which indicates a new lifestyle, a new way of living and doing things. Really, what really is the most important at this hour is the ability to adapt. My question is, what does it really mean to adapt at this critical hour? How do people
Well,
now adapt? Yeah.
well, surely things are going to be increasingly done in ways that they were not, typical of being done previously. Uh, Life generally tends to have a movement towards orthodoxy.
Mhm.
That's certain ways of doing things become orthodox ways of doing things. Does not mean that they're the
Yeah.
best ways, but they acquire acceptance and become orthodoxy. There were many ways that we had accepted that things should be done. For example, in the evolution of the modern economy,
Mm.
work was seen as something located in a place. And so every morning at 5 a.m. and whatever time with this, all of us wake up, get dressed, jump in cars or whatever means of transportation, and begin to head towards work.
Yes.
Now, we found that we needed to social distance to stay away from the office so
Yes.
that we will not contact the virus. And we
Mhm.
began to talk about working from home.
Yes.
And now many organizations have found that they are even more effective working from home.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
if you think
Mm.
about the amount of time people lose in traffic going to work and coming back from the office,
Mm. Mm.
and depending on the nature of that work activity, many
Mm.
found that they were even more
Mm.
effective
Mm.
working from home than from the office, where they
Yes.
were getting each other's way and stuff like
Mhm.
that. So,
Yes.
a new norm for how we work means rethinking the fact that everybody has to head to city center. And this
Mm.
is not the first time that we're developing new norms in doing things.
Yes.
Um, 30 years ago, if you were in the airline business, if you were starting a new airline or anything, your major thought was how to get enough money to hire, to lease a building on the most prominent street in town.
Mm.
In Lagos, Nigeria, it was Broad Street back in those days, 40 years ago. That
Mm.
was prime real estate. If you walk down Broad Street and you were around where CSS is, all of
Yes.
those buildings, you had the Nigeria Airways office, British Airways, or
Mm.
British Caledonian, as it was called back in those days, Vari, all of those. Now, for many years now, I don't think anybody has seen an airline office downtown.
Mm.
They practically don't exist anymore. In fact, British Airways doesn't have an office at all in Nigeria,
Mm.
except in the airport for checking in and all that stuff. Because you can online do everything that you needed to go to an airline. In fact, you were costing them too much money to pay for that office. So if you bought online, your price was lower than if you bought from a ticketing office,
Mm.
to encourage you to stop making them spend that money to have that ticketing office.
Mm.
With time, they got
Wow.
rid of ticketing office completely, and everybody was buying online.
Mm.
And so they shut down their Lagos offices. Now they have only an office in South Africa that takes care of this part of the world for them.
Mm.
So
Mm.
um, that became a new
Yes.
norm of the airline business. In that same way, many things that require movement, that the virus has now scared us into rethinking,
Mm.
may not return to the way we used to doing them.
That brings me that brings me to a question because you mentioned something there. One of the
Normal
tech giants,
about.
uh, one of the tech giants that we have, Google, announced in May this year that most of their staff, I think nearly all their staff, we start working from home till 2021, and Facebook has also followed suit, and quite a number of them has followed that, told that line at this hour. Now, my question is, do you foresee an organization that will be fully functional with its employees working unhindered at the comfort of their homes, number one? I mean, coming down to Nigeria now, what effect would that have on a typical Nigerian employee that wakes up 5 a.m. each morning to apply through third mainland bridge? And also, what implication will that have on our economy? You know, there are some people, they what they do in life, based on the number of people they see on the street, the vulcanizer and everybody, but now they won't have them more on the street anymore. What implication would that have? And also, what implication would that also have on social connections, especially amongst employees that usually gather together and socialize?
Yeah, well, okay. All through human history, man has adapted and adjusted to change.
Yes.
And man will continue to be able to do that in many ways, that his life becomes even more pleasant down the way. About those who profit from the movements to work and back, they will find new things to do if that were to come down. But let me just start by saying that there's nothing new about what we're going through. It's really amusing that one of the best illustrations I can give, I used to use teaching a class in 1994. I acquired a certain notoriety teaching in 1994 by illustrating how the world of business was changing, using an example of music and marketing music. I used to say in those days that, I said, imagine that you have a Nigerian musician, and my illustration in those days used to be Kokoro, the minstrel.
Yes.
I don't know if he's alive. I think he's probably gone. I was talking about 1994. I would say, imagine that Kokoro. Can you imagine Kokoro going platinum? Can you imagine Kokoro selling in Australia? I say, ordinarily, in the way we used to think of music in those days, was impossible, impractical. Why? Because if Kokoro had to sell music in Australia, his recording company, Decca West Africa, would take his music, go to Australia. First of all, find one or two DJs in Australia who are crazy enough to want to play Kokoro's music on Australian radio for anybody to show interest in it.
Yes.
Then find an Australian recording company who will be interested in recording this music and then marketing it in Australia. The possibility moves closer to zero as you proceed. But I said, by the way, I'm talking about 1994 class I was teaching at the Lagos Business School.
Yes.
To them, I said, see, technology is developing such that this guy called Kokoro could in the comfort of his bedroom literally make his own music, make it available on the internet, and there is in the search engine something called ethnic music, and some 1, 2, 3 million crazy human beings on this planet will say that they are ethnic music aficionados, and they can go to the search engine and find this Nigerian ethnic music person, and they say, Kokoro, hey, what is it? And then they say, they'll play it. And the crazy guy in Australia will say, hey, dig it, dig it, dig it. that credit card, and $3 or $4 goes into the account of Kokoro as he downloads this piece.
And that's what's going on now.
1, 2 million of these crazy guys make Kokoro a platinum artist, a rich man.
Yes, but overnight.
Before then, it was impossible to think of.
Yes.
So if I was giving this example in 1994, I'm talking about 1994. Imagine today how our world I can give so many more illustrations. You know, so
that
people will adapt to it.
is true. Okay.
And will learn new ways. Look, today, a lot of, in those days when people like me were young, boy meets girl used to happen in the library. So you had libraries in Lagos. You had the USIS library. You had the British Council library. You
Yeah.
had the city library
Yeah.
itself or whatever. And the boys will go to read, hoping that they will run into some young girl they like there, and tomorrow they are Mr. and Mrs. Now, today, most young men are meeting women on the internet.
Yes. Yes.
Dating
Yes.
services, all kinds of
Yes.
things.
Yes.
That's part of the change that comes with that.
That brings me to another question, in line to what you are just saying now. There is a man I love so much. He's an actor. He wrote a book titled Change or Die. That is Alan Dutchman. And he said, could you change when change matters most? Some 3 years back, I met a young man, probably in his 50s. I asked for his email. He told me he doesn't use email. I said, okay, can I have your WhatsApp line? He said, well, I don't do WhatsApp. I paused for a while. I said, are you on Twitter? Are you on Facebook? He said, what is that? I just looked at him. Where is this one from? So now my question is, what are the likely consequences of resisting change in this hour for individuals, corporations, and our nation? Now that the world has gone global, online, in the cloud, for such a person, where will he be? But I've not seen him now to ask him again, have you gotten your internet now? Are you back on Facebook? Because virtually in the last 3 months now, I have not been to church. Everything has been done online. So what consequences are with such human beings that are still acting as though they're in Stone Age?
Well, there's a place in this world for every kind of person. The first adapters will move on.
Yes.
The laggards at the back will remain in the world where they are and be watching the world go and say, oh, is that the world? It's like the fellow in the aeroplane who says to the pilot, stop, I want to get off. There are people who are going to say, this planet, this world is changing, so in the way I don't like it, stop it, I want to jump off. The truth of the matter is that people have always resisted change, been afraid of change.
Yeah.
In fact, I can go back 500 years and give you one of my favorite quotes about change. And it comes from Niccolo Machiavelli writing in The Prince. And he wrote, and I'll quote him,
yes,
nothing is more difficult to bring about than a new order of things. Because those who profit from the old order will do everything to prevent a new order from coming about. And those who could profit from the new order do not do enough to make it happen. Because man is incredulous in his nature.
Wow.
Not wanting to do new things until they have witnessed experience of it. Niccolo Machiavelli, writing in The Prince 500 years ago.
Wow.
So this is not new to humanity. There are people who will resist change with a variety of motives. There are people who will wait until they see others have changed so they will follow. But the truth of the matter is that those who are unable to adapt quickly will be the losers tomorrow.
I think that's a big lesson.
They will watch things go by.
Thank you so much. I just observed something of late. When the pandemic broke out in China, many of us did not pay much attention to it. Well, we say, well, I think it's one of those Asian epidemic which is peculiar to them. But when it began to spread across the world, our eyeballs were wide open. And our heart was filled with fear. I mean, we saw what happened in Italy, in Spain, in England, United States, Iran. I mean, it is unprecedented. Then we find ourselves locked down for over 2 months. But a lot of people began to agitate to go out. And they start complaining that there is a more pandemic than the COVID-19, which they call hunger pandemic.
Hunger pandemic.
Now, the number of confirmed cases has increased far, far beyond where it was before. But yet, people keep walking around the street as though nothing is happening. I mean, you could see what is happening in the United States. They are recording more deaths, but here you see people going to beach. There is protest going on, Black Lives, matters and all the rest. Yet they don't care anymore. So my question is, what really have changed in people? What caused the mind shift that they don't care anymore, even in the face of the pandemic increasing every day?
Well, I think there are a number of problems. There's a leadership problem in the world.
Yes.
And some countries are better led than others. And so those countries that are better led tend to stay on top of things a little better, follow science more closely, and make the right decisions. Some people are science doubters. They doubt science. And so they say, what this is just and then there's another problem. There's the trust factor in communication. In a country like Denmark, there's a high trust for government. So when government says do this, everybody trusts that government is acting in their best interest. And so they try to do that. In a country like Nigeria, there's a very, very low threshold for trust of government. In fact, the attitude of the average Nigerian is, these thieves have come again. They are setting this thing up to find somewhere to steal money. So let them carry on. This thing won't affect us. Unfortunately, that can be an invitation to death. And so we have to find other ways. In the last 48 hours, I've hardly had a minute to myself, partly because the concern around this matter has brought in a CVL involvement. And we recognize that most people are beginning to say this pandemic doesn't mean anything, it doesn't exist, because people don't trust government in this country. So every day they see these ministers, SGF, at this press conference, and they wonder, what are these characters saying? So we thought that to save ourselves, and the SGF was absolutely correct in expressing exasperation 2 days ago, and saying that, look, this thing is going to come to a head July, August, and the way we are going, we'll just see bodies everywhere very soon, which is my own fear. As a citizen, immediately this pandemic started, the first thing I did was turn to my team at CVL and say, let's begin to produce communication, to go out, podcasts, all kinds of things, to suggest how people should behave, act, so that they can save their own lives. But I recognize that at the point, pointing to this so-called hunger business, people started saying, look, let's forget this. And I realized that this low trust factor was a problem. But should we allow all of ourselves to die because people don't trust government in Nigeria? So we joined up with several civil society organizations, our friends in the private sector, who raised a great deal of food stuff, which we then go into poorer neighborhoods and to show them compassion. In showing them compassion, we build greater empathy and more trust, and then we communicate to them the way they should behave to save their own lives. Yesterday, I was in neighborhoods like Makoko. What was the place? Iwaya. And Oshodi, distributing foodstuff to people. I think that what frightened me as I was driving into Oshodi was the hundreds, if not thousands of people walking around without face masks, just all in street corners and I thought, oh my God, we're going to be wiped out by this thing. Now, this morning we went to widows in Surulere
Yes.
and all of that. But the primary purpose, while the food is important to give them to help them, the primary goal was to show empathy.
Yes.
And in showing empathy, get them to listen to us. The
Yes.
second goal, which is directly related to the CVL mission, which is to
Mm.
train leaders, develop young leaders, is that compassion is a critical part of leadership. The so-called C's of leadership, people have different numbers. I have up to 9 C's: compassion, commitment, care, credibility, and so on and so forth. So you've got to have that courage, that commitment to go into. People told me I was crazy, risking my life going to those places yesterday. But I didn't see it that way. I didn't even see the danger. Because I was driven by compassion and a need to connect to other human beings in their own interest and for the advance of the common good of all. So this is the essence of leadership lesson I wanted to teach young people.
Wow.
As part of the mission of the CVL.
Wow. In fact, CVL have done so well. In fact, I even saw one of the ad by Anoleka using the Igbo language. Very fantastic ad. Very beautiful. I mean, it was, I received it on my WhatsApp. I was like, wow, this is great from CVL. Well done, Prof. That's an amazing one. God bless you so much. That brings me to another question again. You know, really, there's this prediction of looming post-pandemic famine to hit the land. You know, really, we can see it all around us. I can't count the number of phone calls I get from people asking me for one thing or the other. I'm like, what's going on? People that I least expect to call, we call Elvis. Can I have this? We have not feed. I can't feed my family. This is what's going on, and it's really pathetic. You know. Then, it's really pathetic. Though my question now is, how would an ordinary man who may have lost his job adapt to this harsh condition? And what policy recommendation would probably be advised, or you advise to the government at this present time to implement, you know, to cushion the effect of this post-pandemic hunger and famine that is looming? You know, there is this hashtag by Tunde Bakare of formerly Lateran Assembly, now CGCC, Citadel Global Community Church. That's actually my church. He's my pastor. That is the new hashtag. I am my brother's keeper. So how will that hashtag "I'm my brother's keeper," like what we have just done now, going to Oshodi, you know, play a critical role at this moment? Because I strongly believe it's not only government. So how will all these things work? You know, how would all this work around to help the society and the masses?
Well, my sense for our humanity, for why we are human beings, is that God intended us to live in community.
Yes.
And the reason we were not created scattered around the world, one person 20 miles from the other, is that God intended us to be gifts one to the other. And the essence of our humanity is sharing. Yes. That's why human solidarity is fundamental to our nature. That sharing suggests that we should find ways to engage. And in engaging, that we should offer options to overcome challenges to our neighbor. It does not mean that they become parasites and dependent on you. It means that you can show them how to fish, and they can continue to fish and take care of themselves. Sometimes I think we don't do enough of that in society. In terms of what people are going to be facing given the economy, 3 days or so ago, the World Bank suggested that Nigeria was going to go into its worst recession in 40 years.
Wow.
And that more than 50%, I think more people will fall into poverty and so on and so forth. And this is coming not long after we became the poverty capital of the world. So we're going to get even worse.
Oh my God.
Nigeria's economy is in what I call a triple shock crisis. Three shocks have hit us. The first shock, which we ignored, most out of limitations of public leaders in Nigeria, didn't even pay any attention to it.
Yes.
And that shock crystallized for me in a Forbes magazine article late last year that said Nigeria was a money-losing machine. Because of the way Nigeria is governed, it's a dangerous place to invest money in. The governors are reckless. The policies, the biggest risk of doing business in Nigeria is regulatory risk. You put all of this together, Nigeria is not the most attractive place to go and invest in. So I respect that people who are in leadership should literally be in a state of war mode to correct those kinds of problems. But instead, when the budget was finalized late last year,
yes,
oil prices were going down, already down beyond the amount of money they used to project revenues. And National Assembly was going to spend more money to renovate its building than it was going to spend on education for Nigeria.
That is
they were going to buy themselves new fancy cars and all of that. I am not apologetic. I've said that we should abolish the National Assembly for it. As a Democrat, I've said it. At least not this National Assembly. We don't need it. It's not adding any value. And at the best, we should not have it a bicameral legislature at this point in time. Maybe a very limited House of Reps, 2 or 3 reps from every state, and they can seriously make laws for the country. So we're dealing with that first crisis, the first shock, incompetence in leadership. Then we get hit by the second shock. The second shock comes from the collapse of oil prices as a result of the pandemic. And the third shock comes from the disruption of global supply chains as a result of the lockdowns around the world. To recover from this, it's going to be a Herculean task for Nigeria. But this is not a time to call names or blame anybody. It's a time to found a war cabinet. Nigeria is in the moral equivalence of a war. It's a time to get champions of initiatives. You can say, this is a target. You must bring us to this point. What are we going to do? We've got all the support in the world for you to make things happen there. Now, I believe that given the way that our country has evolved, a broad national strategy for development should be one based on what in structural economics today you will call latent comparative advantage. That is to say that you take your factor endowments and develop value chains in which industrial policy will support, not broad kind of import substitution industrialization kind of tariff barriers, but industrial policy focusing on the factors that you are endowed with in which you want to dominate global value chains. Then you can take cassava, you can take plantain, you can take this and create millions of jobs. I have just been sharing with some friends of mine in the agricultural system an initiative that I can show. You can create 15 million jobs developing agricultural value chains, globally competitive, and broadening intra-African trade with cross-border aggregation. But anyway,
in fact,
challenge.
You just hit the nail at the head. You see, one of the biggest problem or challenges we have had in recent time is over dependent upon the oil. That have really dealt with us seriously. I mean, the time, in the days where we have the cocoa plantation, we have the granite pyramid in the north. Each geopolitical zone, I think we were running through federalism at that time. Things were running smoothly. I mean, since we now decided to focus on oil and we forgot every endowment that God has given us, we find ourselves where we are today. It has been a huge challenge. But now the question is, how quickly can we adapt so that we can begin to focus on these other sectors? That, for instance, now as a nation, now we've not been importing rice. I think we have been self reliant on the rice now, the production, and things are happening in that sector, especially in the area of agriculture. So how quickly can we now begin to diversify to all these sectors? Not only will it bring in employment and also revenue generation and all that. I know it's a serious.
There are many different approaches that can give you sustainable value creation in those areas.
Yes.
One of the things to bear in mind, and I was amazed a few weeks ago. I was discussing with Chetan Wanze, who runs the BMS, the intelligence group.
Yes.
And Chetan shared with me a number of graphs that were extremely revealing.
Mm-hmm.
Since the Land Use Act,
yes,
there has been a dramatic change in Nigeria's capacity to produce. You mentioned rice now. All the way until the Land Use Act, the amount of production of rice and the amount of consumption, even if there were gaps, tracked each other, so to speak. Since the Land Use Act, the consumption production differential has become a lot more significant. So what I say to you is that the Land Use Decree Later Act has had a negative influence on production in the country. So deal with those kinds of things at the macro levels. Put a number of things in place. Part of the offering that I have put before a few state governors, I'm involved in an agri-industrial town initiative in Edo State. And our catchment area is about 7 state areas within 2 hours drive from the location. And this includes states like Ondo, Kogi, Edo itself, of course, Anambra, and whatever. Now, what we have said to some of the governors that we've talked to around there is that you can create an arrangement where you create graduate farmers. You get 5 graduates, give them a 5-hectare area. We introduce a farm, a production company that has all the capacities from South Africa, Zimbabwe, whatever, provide support to this gang of 5, who then employ maybe about 5 more people.
Yes.
If we do this around the country, we will immediately create about 12 million jobs. But what is important is that it's sustainable, because the way it will then go, coming into the kind of project we started in Edo State, their production goes into a wholesale produce market like we are developing, and then an industrial park for processing, and then for export. So you aggregate, you make sure that it's sustainable value creation, not like the kind of thing that happened under Obasanjo when we said, oh, everybody, cassava is the new whatever, everybody went to cassava. They all produce so much cassava and nobody could take the cassava. Nobody could take the cassava. And the next year, the farmers refused to produce because they lost all their produce. But this process that we are suggesting involves preservation, aggregation, and all of those things. So the farmers are encouraged to continue producing. And growth is taking place in the economy and is sustainable.
Yes. I think that is a good direction, because I notice one thing with most of the farmers we have, there is a serious waste. Each time I go around, is it my 12 or Oyibo, you see a heap of banana,
more than 60%. It's close to 70% of everything we goes to waste.
It's a waste. Yes, it's a serious. If that can be addressed, it will really go a long way in helping our economy, because there is
that is precisely what the concept or the
Yes.
integrated produce city, the agri value chain enterprise that we have set up is supposed to do to minimize losses.
That's the good one. That's a
Once
nice
a
one.
farmer drives into that estate, they are more or less protected.
Wow, that's a good one. Thank you so much, Prof. I think what another question I have here. Let's go to organizations now. In the face of this pandemic, many corporations have resorted to downsize, right size, lay off staff, and all the rest. One particular bank in Nigeria, tried doing that part, and there was a public outcry on social media. I think they now subpeddled, and that decision wasn't taken anymore. But what they have decided to do now, many of them in quote, is to slash the salaries of workers to some to 50 to 70%, and a large number of employees are virtually just going without pay. And but my question is, are all these organizations truly going through financial crisis? Is it justified to say that some of these organizations may likely be hiding under COVID-19 to say things are not okay, and just to, I don't know. It's because I watch on TV when some employees were complaining, they still have money, but why they don't want to pay us? But majority of them are saying things are rough, we cannot pay. So I'm just wondering, is there any sinister kind of thing going on?
No, I think the truth is that every situation will have to be resolved in that organization. They have to look at their long-term future.
Yes.
Because you can see cash now, and it will be dead in 6 months if you don't manage it in a particular way. The thing is for the leadership of the businesses to be very honest and open with their people, because they need their people, they need the environment. And when everybody is honest with each other, we will find the appropriate solution for each kind of business situation.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much on that. So let me go on again. Recently, I decided to refresh my mind with a very popular book we all know that came up in the 90s, titled "Good to Great" by Jim Collins. And he made a statement here. He said, "Good is the enemy of great," and that is one of the key reasons why we have so little that become great. We don't have great schools, principally because we have good schools. We don't have great government, principally because we have good government. Few people attain great lives, in large part because it is just so easy to settle for a good life. The vast majority of companies never become great, precisely because the vast majority become quite good. And that is their main problem. So my question is, in light of this statement by Jim Collins, how would you rate the organizations in Nigeria for their readiness or propensity to seize the opportunities in this pandemic for greatness?
To seize the opportunities for greatness?
Yes.
Well, everything you achieve in life comes from planning. Okay. Nothing happens by accident. You can get lucky, but the word is that luck smiles on the prepared. If you are properly prepared, you may then run into some luck that advances your preparation. But nothing happens really by luck. So the key to greatness is planning. How do you develop your strategy? And how does your strategy adapt to the kind of dramatic change that we're going through? You know, crisis, you've heard the famous Chinese saying that there are two sides of a coin: opportunity, crisis. For most people, this is a huge opportunity. There's an anecdotal remark I make fairly frequently, and this is drawn from American history and a time such as this, actually. After the Great Spanish influenza of
Yes.
1919. The American economy went into super
Depression.
boom. The 1920s are referred to as the roaring 20s.
It was in 1990. Okay.
Now, the roaring 20s roared up to 2029.
Yes.
And went into a crash.
A crash, yes.
A depression. The Great Depression.
Of 1930.
As the Great Depression took off, rich men were jumping from 50-story buildings to their death. Most had lost their fortunes. There is a famous story. I've heard it on radio here, on one of those motivational talk shows on radio. You know, this meeting in Chicago, I think 1926 or 7 or whatever. So the richest men in the world met. By 1930 something, many of those men had committed suicide, were in a sanatorium, they had gone mad or something. But during that same season, there was a gentleman who was asking himself, what will people do now that they have become so poor? Which reminds me of I visited Thailand during the Asian financial crisis in 1998. And there was a market in Bangkok called a market for people who used to be millionaires. That's where they went to get rid of their boats, to get rid of their Rolls Royces and stuff like that. Now,
oh my God.
So going back to 1929, this guy was asking himself, all these rich men who eat, or middle class guys who eat filet mignon, who eat caviar, now that they are getting poorer, what would they eat? In economics, what they are called inferior goods. They move to inferior goods. So this guy asked himself, which inferior good can I offer that can take off as people are getting poor? One of the most inferior goods around food was the potato. You know, those days it was infra dig to eat a potato. So if you had to eat potatoes, you hide to eat it. You could buy it for a basket, a couple of pennies in Idaho. So this guy thought of, okay, how can I make potatoes popular for people to begin to eat it? First of all, how can I store it to make sure that I can preserve huge quantities? Went to a couple of research institutes, found that it was easy to preserve potatoes.
Wow.
Dehydrate them, just take the water out of the thing, and you can store it for very long. Just put it back inside water, and it completely regains the properties of potato.
Wow.
So he chopped them off into bits, packed them in bags. All you have to do is put it in water and you fry. And it comes out looking good.
Wow.
And he said that this thing should not be called potato. They have a new name, French fries.
Now that's interesting.
Were invented. So you're no more eating potatoes, you're eating French fries.
Yes.
Now, that man whose name is R.J. Simplot, or was R.J. Simplot, eventually ran into a guy called Ray Kroc, who founded McDonald's.
McDonald's, yes. 1965,
and between them, the French fry and the hamburger became the American staple. And R.J. Simplot came out of a Great Depression worth $3.68 billion US.
Wow.
So the point is, think, take advantage, act. That's how you achieve greatness.
Wow. Now this is in fact, think and take advantage of the situation. I mean, I've come to realize in every problem there is a solution. And when you solve the problem, you become rich. I think that was what this gentleman applied. And I noticed that is really lacking in many people, because they see more of the problem, more of the issue that is affecting their lives. They don't see the other way around. You know, it reminds me of what Helen Keller said. They asked her a question. What is worse than being born blind? He said to have sight but not seeing. You know, because a lot of people are seeing but are not seeing. So I just pray that many people will begin to see opportunities in the mud. which is very,
Yes,
very
indeed.
vital, yes, in this critical time, because there are quite a number of opportunities one can lay hold on and become very rich. And also from what you said there, preparation is very important. Like someone said, they say success occurs when preparation meets opportunity. So we need to be prepared so that when the opportunity presents itself, then we can launch forth and make it. Now, I have another question here, which has to do with you know empowerment. I must say I've been so privileged to work with you in a number of trainings with executives of big corporations in Nigeria. My question now is, in light of this global pandemic, what training intervention mechanism would you recommend for organization, especially when it comes to human capacity building?
Well, there's so many different ways that you can intervene in developing people. Uh, all of them have their value. First of all, you can train the whole organization.
Okay.
And in training the whole organization, your emphasis really is on things like shared values. How do you build a corporate culture that sustains certain kind of performance? Because culture is fundamental to effectiveness. You can train groups within the organization, because if you have a strategy, you need to be able to drive them through uh, performance groups in the organization that have both know-how and know why. You need to build leadership in the organization. You can have the brightest guys come together, and the team dynamics is such that they can perform.
Yes.
I like very much a famous fable, a book written by a guy called Patrick Lencioni, The Five Dysfunctions of a Team.
Of a team, yes.
And Lencioni points us to how two organizations with all the everything can perform differently, and what it was that prevented one team from doing the right thing.
Wow.
And then, of course, you can have individual training.
Yes.
However, whatever individual training you bring, the organization must have a culture that makes it easy to take that individual training and truly share it into the organization. That's how you build learning organizations, where an individual acquires knowledge from outside, but it becomes part of the Weltanschauung, the part of the institutional memory of the organization. These are things I think that organizational leadership should focus on.
Wow, thank you so much, Prof. We will be rounding up very soon. But I have another question here. You know, personally, I'm a student of leadership and also a teacher of leadership. You know, there is a proverb that says, "In learning you teach, and in teaching you learn."
Absolutely.
And also a very popular saying that everything rises and falls on leadership, meaning what you become in life or fail to become in life boils down on leadership. You know, that's to say that if to truly achieve success in life, you must be able to lead your life first before leading others. You know, according to Thomas Watson, he said, nothing so conclusively proves a man's ability to lead others as to what he does day to day to lead himself. So my question here is, how would a sense of self-leadership play a critical role in an individual's ability to adapt to a new normal that we find ourselves, especially from the organizational perspective and also for individuals in their daily and personal life?
Well, I think that unless you have self-mastery,
yes,
you will never be able to really get others to follow you. So a starting point is self-mastery. A man know thyself. We assume very often that we know ourselves completely, which is not completely true. There are situations where we know some things about ourselves that others don't know. There are situations where others know some things about us that we don't know. I mean, the whole idea of 360 degrees feedback is essentially designed to help us deal with those kinds of challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do believe that the beginning point of any leadership initiative is self-mastery, and that we
Yes.
need to master, to know who we are.
Mm,
And when we know who we are, we find shortcomings that we can then overcome, because we
yes.
know that we have them and we can manage around them.
Mm, mm.
None of us is
Self
perfect.
Wow, self mastery, very very important. Thank you so much, Prof. Then my I think my last question here before we round up. Um, During the heat of this pandemic, we saw on television a number of the youths, popularly known as the Amajiris, being relocated from one state to the other in the north. And as a matter of fact, it is believed that some of them have found themselves down to the south. Do you foresee any challenge of not meaningfully engaging this youth to so that they can get acclimatized to their new environment? And also, do you see any social menace being created as a result of this sudden movement of this youth? And also, how will Nigerian youth, especially the teeming unemployed, be gainfully engaged and also be involved in our democratic process?
Well, I think that as a country, very sadly, we are paying the price of a leadership that did not realize that the future depends on its young people.
Mm.
One of the things that I have said many times is that every generation has a duty to make its shoulders available
Mm. Mm.
for the next
Mm.
generation to stand on, so they can
Wow.
see tomorrow more clearly.
Wow. Wow.
Not only have we neglected to do so generally in our country, we've not
Mm.
invested enough in our young people, but
Mm.
some parts of our country have been more negligent in that regard,
Yes.
like the northern parts of our country. We have not invested enough in the young people in that area. And these movements today are really a result of people who find that they have lives that are empty. They have
Mm.
nothing to aspire to, no skills, nothing. So the move south, even though all kinds of political colorations can come to it or not come to it, it's just a natural desperation move.
Mm.
It was bound to happen.
Mm.
I predicted this years ago. In 2001,
Yes.
I I gave a lecture which was spawned off 3 books written on Nigeria. One was by a gentleman called Robert Kaplan, and the book was titled The Coming Anarchy. And Kaplan in The Coming Anarchy looked at
Mm.
the evolving scenario of cleavages. It was about West Africa, actually, not Nigeria. Cleavages, economic, political, religious, ethnic. And those cleavages would converge into a descent into anarchy. Kalmeya had just written the book on Nigeria, which was titled This House Has Fallen, Midnight in Nigeria. And a third book had just also come out about Nigeria from an American. And I gave this lecture in which I looked at these factors and how they will result in problems. In fact, I was so agitated by the possible outcomes that I founded an NGO called Nutra, Nigerians United to Resist Anarchy. 20 years on, what I feared, what I predicted has come to pass, very sadly. And that's the challenge we have to deal with.
Thank you so much. Before we round up, let me just we have few questions. I believe maybe we'll just answer one or two of them, but let me just read out one of them I have here. Lizzie Wofa is just asking, what do you recommend as a model for the educational sector to begin to gain? Sorry, let me do it. I just want to get it very well. What do you recommend as a model for the educational sector to begin again, especially as it relates, especially as it affects early learning stage? Thank you.
Oh, beautiful, brilliant question. You know, one of the biggest problems that we have in our country is that we overfocus on tertiary education, whereas the most important is primary education. Garbage in, garbage out. If by the time they get to entering university, they don't have anything, what will come out of university will be garbage. So we've not done enough focusing on primary education. And in primary education, which is the period during which the mind develops the most, we must emphasize problem-solving mindsets. What we tend to do is encourage rote learning. The Montessori kinds of schools do more to open up the minds of young people to problem solving. Many years ago, I read a book, one of the best books written on education, actually, in my view, by a Brazilian author called Paulo Freire. The book was titled The Pedagogy of the Oppressed.
Yes.
And Paulo Freire argues about how colonial education treats the mind of the colonized as a piggy bank. They just deposit enough to enable them maintain things and struggle along and not to be creative and inventive. Out of Paulo Freire's work, I developed what I'd like to call a paradigm on education, which I call the pedagogy of the determined, which begins by trying to show the future to the learner and getting the learner to connect to that future and creatively develop himself towards that future, drawn largely from Paulo Freire's thinking. But Freire was a Marxist and I was not. So that was the major. So I focused on the entrepreneurship input into Freire's framework.
Thank you. So I think there's another question, I think still in that line. This one is being asked by one Nika. She said, how do we manage the effect of COVID-19 on our educational institutions, especially those ones that are not offering online teaching and lectures right now?
We've been letting minds go to waste. But there are ways around this. Incidentally, there is a tech company that I know well called Gidimo. Gidimo is led by Dr. Tunji Adegbeson, that has created gaming as a way of learning. A very brilliant set of schemes that can allow people learn very fast and make you very competent in your WAEC and NECO or whatever it is within a very, very short period of time through these games. And I think I would recommend very strongly that governments find a way of engaging Gidimo to use the platform that they have created to migrate young learners and get them ahead.
Okay, that is quite interesting. My viewers, I hope you are actually listening and all the recommendation that the Prof is giving. I think Lizzie also asked another question here. She asked, Prof, would you recommend a shift in the current academic calendar of September to July yearly?
What's in a date? It doesn't matter whether you start in January, you start in December, you start in... The only reason I would give thought to a particular calendar of academic is if we want to adapt it to, say, our agricultural seasons. If we want for people to be developed along those value chains, so that if we are in an area that grows sesame seeds, for example, we can develop people in those areas during that season or whatever. Other than that, for me, whether it's January to December, when I went to secondary school, the academic year was January to December back in the 60s. It switched at some point to the only problem at that time, there was a misalignment between secondary schools and universities. I think universities that started with the European tradition were starting in September, October, and secondary schools are starting in January to December. So you graduate in December, and you have to wait to September before you can go into university.
The US, they run up to, I think, about 2 or 3 sections. People enter in various times of the year. Like though, which is quite different from what we run here. I think we are just quite static. So if there's need for such a robust change as well to actually help it. Well said, Prof. I think it's been a wonderful time with you. And before we call it a day, I would like you to say a final word to Nigerians and the world as we round up. So, a word of advice at this time. So, let them, the floor is yours now. Just give them a word.
Okay, well, my word is Nigerians should begin to believe in themselves and not to think that there's anything that is impossible. Our country is in a bad shape, but we can rebuild it. I like the example I use often when I was living in the US. When I was living in the US as a graduate student, I had a nice man as president, but his policies took America very far back. Jimmy Carter, inflation was at 29%, things were going wrong. And an old man called Reagan defeated him as an incumbent president and stimulated belief in America. The youth of America responded. When I was on American campuses as a grad student in March, the seniors, the final year students, were busy working on their CVs, planning to go for interviews for jobs that were not there. When I returned to America after Reagan, the seniors in March were not working on their CVs, they were working on their business plans and hoping to become billionaires before their 26th birthday. They created a whole new economy. The dot-com revolution transformed America, gave it back its gate, and America was back. I believe that the youth of this country can bring Nigeria back. And they have a horrible base, they have a terrible institutional arrangement, they have a government that is completely dysfunctional, but it's still possible to overcome these things and rebuild their country.
Wow!
And I wish everybody the best.
Wow! Thank you so much, Prof. In fact, you just hit the nail at the head. I mean, there was a shift in America from CV to business plan. I mean, the likes of Bill Gates, the likes of Google, Larry Page, some of them, even Steve Jobs, and all of them, they all came out from that generation. And I believe, yes, I believe the youth of Nigeria can do same. Prof, it's really an honor and privilege hosting you this evening. Thank you so much. The words are not enough to thank you for creating time. I remember we just spoke, you told me, Elvis, I have something else to do, but I'll be here. But thank you and thank you. A lot of viewers have been commenting here and they are so glad hearing you talk to them and give them word of advice and encouragement at this time that people are going through a hard time and they need words like this to keep them going. So we thank you, sir, and we appreciate you. Thank you so much, and God bless you.
It's a great pleasure. We thank God.
Thank you, sir. All right, sir. Bye-bye. Wow, viewers, thank you so much for finding time to be on this program. And this is just the beginning. I strongly believe we have a lot that is coming up. By God's grace, next month, do you know who we have coming up? We will be having his I don't know how will I put it, how will I introduce him now? But he's a man that I respect so much as well. He's a distinguished Nigerian who has accomplished so much. He's the person of Dr. Christopher Kolade. We'll be having him live by next month. So stay tuned and ensure that you tell your friend the advert for that will be out very soon. So he has confirmed to be with us by next month. So let's get ready for that. Thank you so much for the time. And I wish you a wonderful time. Have a great weekend. God bless you. Bye-bye.